let's bring in our first guest tonight, Mr. Brian Mitch Daniels. What's up, Mitch? How you doing? Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you coming on with us today, bud.
Thanks for having me on.
How awesome, man. We're doing great, man. Let's talk about, I guess, what you've been up to, musically. I know it's been about 3 years now, I think, or so, since you left Madball, and I haven't really heard much from you in terms of musically since. Although recently we did hear you do a kick-ass cover of Sepultura's Manifest. Obviously, KSID, that's one of my favorite, old-time metal records. It features yourself. You got Tony Campos from Static X in there, Mark Rizzo from Soulfly, and a couple other guys. So go ahead and tell us about how that all came together with you guys. What was the impetus to, for putting that together?
Sure. That was Walter.
Okay.
Who's one of our good friends. And Walter played for a quick minute in Madball before I was in the band. Okay. Walter played for a bunch of years with DRI. Mm-hmm. He's got a crazy resume. He's played with a ton of bands that you would know. So he reached out to me over the summer and said, "Hey, I've been doing these little kind of quarantine jam things, and we want to do this Sepultura track." And I was like, "Cool, awesome." I think by the time he reached out to me, him and Tony had already done the bass and drums. So they sent it to me. I tracked guitars, and then we had Rizzo sent his guitars over. Which was crazy because it was like he sent a video of himself, and that was him playing. So we extracted the audio from that.
Oh, okay.
Put it together, and then found Matt to sing on it, and put it out. It all came together within about a month. It's pretty quick.
Oh wow. Okay, that's pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah, and put a video together for it, and got a little attention with it. It was fun. It's obviously Sepultura is a band that, influenced the shit out of everybody, me included. Sure. And that's obvious. That's definitely one of my favorite records.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. Well, like I said, I mentioned before, man, it's been, a few years now since you've ended your long tenure with, one of New York hardcore's all-time greatest bands and one of the most influential bands, like I said earlier, that I listened to growing up. And you were with them for 16 years. Man, that's longer than any other, guitarist that they ever had. And I remember reading that after you left that you really wanted to focus more on producing. So I guess go ahead and fill us in on what you've been up to in terms of, production wise, what you've been doing since you left Madball.
Sure. I mean, producing is something that I was a little bit involved with even before I was ever even in bands. I went to school in New York City right out of high school for audio engineering.
Okay.
And after that, I worked in a recording studio in Manhattan. That was one of the top facilities in the whole world. They were a really famous studio called Skyline Studios.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't doing anything serious there. I was making coffee and answering the phones as, entry level. But
sure.
They would let you, they kind of turned a blind eye if you wanted to sneak in there at night and do some work. So I got my feet wet a little bit. At first, I produced with another guy. We did some stuff for Sub-Zero. Mm-hmm. New York hardcore band. We also produced a band called Dark Side, New York City.
Sure.
That was Alan Blake from Sheer Terror, the original Sheer Terror guitar player. It was the thing that he did after, and then they, Dark Side's been around a long time.
Yeah, sure.
And so I did some stuff then, and then started playing in bands, and it's something that I kind of picked up. I want to say about 9 or 10 years ago, while I was still in Madball. I got asked to work with an Italian band called Strength Approach, which is a band that I toured with a bunch with Madball, got to be good friends with them. And I did a couple of different things with them. We did an EP, and then they liked how that came out. So I went back over, I think it was in 2015, and did a full-length record with them in Rome. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to think of what was after that. After that, I worked Dutch band called All for Nothing. Did a full length album for them, and then so when the band thing went down and I ended up leaving the band, it was something that I was like, I really kind of want to focus on this. It's not a full-time thing, I still work. I work in production, event production. I'm a stagehand here in New York. That's pretty much my gig now. But
Mhm.
creatively, the musical side of me, I'm still working with bands.
Sure.
Awesome.
Well, is it satisfying as a musician to produce other bands? Because I know a million musicians, man, and you guys all have the bug. Even when you go on to do something else, you still want to make music. That's just the musician's creed.
Yes.
And I almost have always thought that guys that transition like yourself from actual performer to production, that it's got to be difficult because you don't have as much creative input into it. And you listen to another band making music, and while you try to put your ear to it to make it the best it can, there's usually a piece inside of you that's like, I wouldn't fucking do it that way. I would do it this way. And has that been the case for you?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, you have it's a different kind of creative input that you have. I mean, most of the bands I've worked with have been bands that are younger. I'm not talking like they're kids, but they're bands that I feel like some of my experience I can impart to them, and I can show them things that I learned over the years in recording with everything I ever worked with, the stuff I produced, the stuff I recorded with Skarhead, the stuff I recorded with Madball. And I learned from, a lot of those bands that have been doing it from before me. So it's just, it is a very creative and fulfilling process to work with bands like that and show them, little tricks you learned over the years. The biggest message I always try to explain to bands is just preparation.
Sure.
Preparation, I'll say it 500 times. The more time you spend in the rehearsal studio, the less time you spend in the recording studio. And recording studios are expensive. So you're saving money. I tell guys, if you go in completely prepared where the songs are rehearsed and you've got everything down and all the kinks worked out, well, then the recording process is just a formality almost.
Sure.
Most of the creativity and the magic is going to happen when they're writing the songs. And then when you're in the studio, it's just a matter of making that represent, making what you play represent the best angle of the song.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, though. I'm going to devil's advocate this a little bit. That theory works with the experienced pros like yourself that are, the grizzled veterans that understand the business. Hardcore bands today, notoriously difficult. They're younger. They don't have that experience. They just, honestly, it has a lot to do with experience.
I'll be a little cutthroat.
Go ahead.
Not the bands that are going anywhere.
True.
Okay, yeah.
If you're a hardcore band, first of all, hardcore is about the 18th thing on the list of things that make money.
Right.
Hardcore is not a rich man's game. There's not a lot of money in it. 99% of the bands do it for the love of the music and the scene. So, if you don't have your shit together, if you're going to be a difficult to work with band, you're going to go nowhere. It's the bands that, you look at the bands over the years that have made something of themselves. Those are the guys that took the opportunities that were given to them and made the most of them. Bands that went in, like I said, prepared. The bands I've worked with, I've been very lucky. They've been prepared. They've been hungry. They've put tremendous amount of work into their songs and into their records. And if they're working with me, they're open-minded. It's not like they know everything. They've come to me because they say, oh, maybe this guy can show us some stuff we didn't know, or maybe this guy can guide us a little bit. So,
right.
Again, a difficult hardcore band, when you're Bruce Springsteen or U2, you can be difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Millions. When you're a hardcore band, you better have your shit together.
Right. No doubt, man. Is it a situation for you that, you might hear the music and like the music, but when you meet the guys and if they come off like they're just going to be douchebags, that you'll walk away from it? Or would you produce them or will you make your check, I guess?
Yeah, I guess everything, if it was an amazing band and they were a pain in the ass, that would be one thing. If they were great guys and their songs were dog shit, it wouldn't matter. I wouldn't want to work with them. Everything's, I guess, relative. I've been very lucky. I haven't worked with anybody who's been any bit difficult. Everybody's got a good attitude. Everybody goes in knowing what they got to do. And when I tell them, my theory about preparation and having everything, all the kinks ironed out and all the bugs out, they understand it.
Sure, no doubt. Just I'm going to pivot back to your music, Mitts. From what I hear, from mutual acquaintances of ours, it's that even though you've been in a hardcore scene for years, you're a big fan of music that's way outside the whole hardcore and urban music hemisphere.
Oh, yeah.
And I always find it pretty interesting to talk to musicians who play a certain style of music, but yet mainly listen to maybe some other genres that are nowhere near the same style of music that they play in their bands. How difficult is it for you, in your case, with hardcore, since obviously that's what you're known for playing? How difficult is it to allow those other influences, or not allow, I should say, those other influences for what you listen to sort of seep into the music you're making for, like, say, when you were with Madball or any of the hardcore bands you played with?
I think that the more music you listen to, the better musician you're going to be. Like the more variety you listen to, the better musician you're going to be. It's almost like inbreeding. If you listen to nothing but metal and you sit down and try to write a metal song, there's no variety in there. You're going to basically just be copied. If you look at the trailblazers of any genre, they weren't listening to their style alone. They were listening to, everything. There was always something outside their world that they blended in that made it that unique.
Mm-hmm.
I was pure metal and hardcore up until about 18 years old. And then I discovered the rest of the world. It's like,
Sure.
you have to open your mind. You can only be, when I first discovered metal and hardcore, it was incredible. It changed my world. But then as I got, started to become a little bit of an adult, I started to listen to some more classic rock. Some more punk came in. I got a little more into punk stuff in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And then by my mid-20s, I was, full on, like I kind of revisited all the pop stuff that had gone on when I was a kid that I hated because it wasn't Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
And all that stuff rounds you out as a musician. You listen to songwriting of any genre. Writing a song is kind of very similar no matter what kind of music you're writing. So I'm a big believer that the more you listen to, the more education you get on music, and it makes you that much better of a songwriter, that much better of a producer, just that much better even of a music listener. Even if you're not in a band, if you're only listening to one kind of music, you're really limiting yourself.
Sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. So let's go. We're going to talk a little bit about Madball. When you first joined the band back in the early 2000s, and I remember when you did, it wasn't too long after they had initially disbanded, which obviously didn't last too long, which was a great thing. And it sort of marked sort of like that second incarnation of Madball at that time. And I believe I think you were still playing possibly with Skarhead around that time. And I know one of the things about Madball was that they had gone through, several guitarists since they had broke out of New York City and became more of a global act. Was one of the reasons that they did get back, together for that second incarnation, was it due to the fact that they were able to, find stability at guitar spot with someone like yourself? And did you feel any pressure at that time, filling in those shoes of such, heralded, really great guitarists they had, like Matt Henderson?
Yeah, I definitely felt pressure. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
They were a band that, when I was in Skarhead, we did a bunch of tours together. And to me, Madball was like the gold standard. I was like,
sure. These
guys every night bring an incredible live show. They're tight. There's a show. It's not just a bunch of guys getting up there playing. It really had showed me like, wow, this is the level that you need to be at. And so just to give you a little of the history, they had Matt was the steady guy for years and years. And then Matt left the band, I think in like 98. And they went through a couple of lineup changes that got him a little frustrated. And then there were some other problems going on. And when I came into the picture, they were basically done with it. Hoya and Freddie were frustrated with the way things had been going. And the plan was, that's it, we're done. They're breaking the band up. And I remember reaching out to Hoya, and I was like, hey, man, I feel for you. I'm sorry to hear what you guys are going through, but I told them, I got time. If you guys need someone to fill in, I'm your man. I can learn this stuff, real fast. It'd be an honor for me to help out. And at first he said, no, we're done. We're hanging it up. And then a little while went by, and he reached out to me again. He says, all right, we're going to do one last tour. We're going to do a Europe tour. And then we're breaking the band up. And he says, we'd love it if you could help us out. So that was the first thing I did with him. I did a European tour in the spring of 2001, okay, during which that tour we got asked to do CBGB final show, and we got asked to do a Japan run. So we ended up doing those things, and the band ended. And I was just happy to have been a part of the very end of it. The last CB show we played as a 5-piece where Matt Henderson came up, and we had 2 guitars, which is always fun to play with Matt. And the band broke up, and I thought it was done. I went on tour with them, and I spent a year I spent a whole tour with them, giving interview after interview to these magazines and fanzines, where they were all saying, "Oh, you're not really breaking up, are you? This is just to say, whatever." And they were like, "No, we're really done. This is it. We're not doing this just for publicity. We're not doing this." So I was convinced. I thought it was over. And about a year went by, and I saw Freddie one night at a show at CB's. I think we were H2O show that we were hanging out. And he kind of whispered in my ear. He says, "Hey, don't sleep on Madball." And I was like, "Whoa, like really?" Like, it blew me away.
Sure.
And so I, not to make this into a whole history lesson, but so later on, within a month or so, he reached out and said, "Hey, we're gonna get the band back together, and I want you to be the guitar player." And it went from there. That was 14, 15 more years.
Wow. Yeah, it's awesome, man. Well, speaking of, you and your ball, my favorite release that you were on was the album Legacy. But I think the best sounding release though was Empire. That had, that obviously had Jay Weinberg from Slipknot was on drums, and it was produced by Eric Rutan, of course, who's from Morbid Angel and Hate Eternal. Talk about the recording of that record. Do you agree that was the best sounding album of your tenure, or do you think there was another album that was better?
If I had to pick a personal favorite sounding production wise, I think that Hardcore Lives was my favorite.
Okay.
That was the one where it was engineered. The recording was engineered by Ken Susi from Unearth.
Okay.
And it was mixed by Zeus, who had done Legacy and Infiltrate the System.
Sure.
And Zeus did a great job. I think it just by that point, we were on. That was our 4th record since I'd been in the band. We were pretty dialed in. We kind of had the method down.
Okay.
We were happy.
Awesome.
Empire was cool working with Rutan because we had toured with Hate Eternal within like 5-6 years before that. So we've known Eric ever since. He's a great guy. He's a huge perfectionist, especially when it comes to guitars. He really pushed me, which was fun. We did it in Florida, so couldn't complain about the weather. Is that my favorite record sound wise? No, I'm glad to hear it's yours. I don't hate it.
It's mine. Yeah,
it's definitely got a unique. I think out of the 4 that I did, Legacy, Infiltrate, Empire, and Hardcore Lives, it sounds different than the other 3.
It does. Yeah.
Freddie sounded like a monster on it. I remember that. His vocals came out awesome on that.
Yeah.
But it was a fun process. We had a good time doing it.
Yeah, no, awesome. And although I love, obviously what you've done with Madball, man, throughout your career, to this day, I still think the best stuff you did was that Ragmen EP you guys did on Eulogy back in like 2004 or 3. I mean, it boggles my mind because it was, you guys were a super group there. You had George from, Marauder, had Rig from Madball and Hate, and Bulldog from Earth Crisis. I mean, and not a lot of people really know even about that EP. It's a fucking great EP, man. It's a great record. Obstacles, man, that's a great song. Whatever happened in that project? How did that come about? How did you guys want to doing that? And then how come you guys just kind of never did anything with that again?
That was it. That ended up coming together when I had a lot of that stuff written when Madball was on Hate, that little breakup.
Okay.
And then when we got going again, within a year or so, Freddie and Hoya ended up doing the Hazen Street thing.
That's right. Okay.
Which was the rock project. And when those guys were doing that, you know, Madball was not by any means on a hiatus, but they were focused on Hazen Street for the first, I want to say for like the second half of 2003 and the first, almost all of 2004. So I got together with Rig and started writing that stuff. And we got a lot of it written. And yeah, it just kind of came together quick. We got George on vocals, Bulldog. You know, I knew Bulldog from Earth Crisis when we had toured with. It was a tour we did in 1998 that was Earth Crisis, Madball, Hatebreed, Skarhead, and there's like entire books that could be written about that tour.
I'm sure. Man,
and the problem with the books is you have to put names in there, and that ain't gonna happen until 3-4 generations have passed when there's nobody around to be incriminated.
Sure.
but we knew those guys, so Bulldog was a good thought. I'm like, oh, that guy's got a great tone. We did that record on Eulogy, and it was kind of, it started to kind of come together like, well, if these guys are going to be doing the Hazen Street thing, this will give me and Rig something to do and keep the ball rolling and have some music going on. And then the Hazen Street kind of ran its course. There's a whole story behind that. That record, unfortunately, didn't get the push that it should have. I mean, that was meant to be the next, like, that was supposed to be a major label smash. Mm-hmm. The songs are incredible. The productions, the performance, everything's great. I just think the label kind of got cold feet about it at the end and didn't push it as hard. Mm-hmm. But by the end of 2004, we were back full tilt writing for the first for Legacy, which would become Legacy, and that was that. Madball was my first priority. We put the Ragmen out. We did a little bit of touring around the States. We went to Europe once for a couple of shows, but we were back with Madball, so that kind of put it on the shelf, and it's been on the shelf ever since.
No question. Well, Mitz, as a production guy, I'm more fascinated these days with production than anything. Not because, it's a skill, and I don't think people realize that it's a skill. I think a lot of people think that it's, you twist a couple knobs and you turn the volume up and then that's it, No. That being said, it is a skill, and there's a lot of idiosyncrasies that goes into making a quality recording of anybody, whether it's a country solo guy or a hardcore band or a metal band, etc. For you as a production guy, does it bother you to no end that the world is more and more by the day leaning towards streaming, where they're just hearing a low quality image of the work that legitimately could spend months or even a year producing?
Yeah.
Is that bothersome?
I mean, I think that the quality of that stuff has come up, though. I mean, I remember when satellite radio first came on, it sounded like, it was really boxy and sounded paper thin. A lot of, I remember, YouTube and all that stuff, when you first used to post songs up, they didn't sound as good. Now you listen to YouTube videos, and they're pretty much on par with your streaming stuff like Spotify, Apple. But, you're mixing to what you're getting used on. I mean, how much stuff in the 50s and 60s was played on AM radio. Yeah. The quality of something is a big part. But, I'm more interested in the production as far as the performance goes. If the energy's there and the songs are slamming and everything's like translating the way you want it to, it shouldn't matter whether you listen to it on your phone or whether you listen to it on a $5,000 set of speakers.
Sure. And you may not even think about this, but it's just the sickness in my brain that always thinks about this kind of stuff. Do you produce in a way, almost forward thinking to how the medium is going to change, meaning that you really focus on the individual tracks of every little thing, because the medium might change later to where having better production might lead to an actual better sounding, like a remix, because everybody remixes and remasters now, but a lot of it was because there just wasn't as good of a sound, where now you know, it seems like the only reason you would do that is because the technology gets better.
I think the playing field is very level now. If you listen to the records that I grew up on, I'll say hardcore is the perfect example. If you listen to any band that's a cornerstone of the genre right now, their demo sounded like shit. Their
Right.
first record sounded like a bunch of guys that went into a studio and had no idea what they were doing, and was produced by somebody that had no idea what hardcore was. And then by their second and third record, they started to come together. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because to get into a real studio back in those days cost, $50,000. Nowadays, you can make an incredible sounding record on a budget that's a tenth of that. So I think that you've got bands now making their first record that sounds just as good as what their third or fourth record will sound like. But again, production as far as audio quality, to me, is secondary to performance. If you can get that magical performance down, if you got the drummer and the bass player and the guitar player, they're locked in, and then the singers singing some magic, it's got to have that emotion he's got coming out of him, that once in a lifetime performance out of somebody, and you get that all going at the same time, man. I almost don't care if the production's, those guys' record sounds better. I don't give a shit. Yeah, obviously you want it to sound up to standard, and you want everything to be clear. You don't want anything to get drowned out. You want to get the message across with the music, but the magic is way more important than the science.
Sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, hey, Mitch, before we wrap things up, I know you've got an announcement you want to make to the audience tonight, so why don't you go ahead and do that?
Sure. So I haven't released anything other than that Sepultura thing. And then since I left the band back, as you said, I think it's 3 years ago now, I've got something coming out. I should say a buddy of mine, guitar player for Entombed AD, my buddy Guilherme Miranda, he plays for Entombed AD, which is like the next generation from Entombed, because those guys kind of had a little dispute. So one guy's got the name, and then my friend LG's got Entombed AD. So Guilherme reached out to me this summer and asked if I wanted to play on a project. He's like, we want to do something. We've got a bunch of guys I'm thinking of, but you were the first person that, I asked for it, or maybe the second or whatever. So we've got a project coming out, and it's not a cover like other stuff that like the Sepultura thing. This is original. It's called Dark Times Collaboration. It's me. It's Guilherme from Entombed AD. It's Chris, bass player from Unearth. It is a drummer named Jono Garrett, who I just met through this project. And so me and Guilherme play guitar. That's the bass. That's the drummer. And we brought in a singer. So another band I produced recently is a band called Eternal Struggle from Tel Aviv. That's a story I didn't actually get a chance to bring up. Band I produced from Tel Aviv, and when we had this song going around for this thing, Guilherme asked me what would be a good, if I had any ideas for a singer. So we're using Ori Frank from Eternal Struggle. It's a new band coming out of Israel. He sang on it. And Guilherme also asked a hip hop guy from Brazil, this guy Phantom DK. So he does like a little verse on it. It's one song right now. We may do more in the future. We're going to release the song within a couple of weeks, and there's going to be a video as well. And that'll be the first new music that I've been a part of that I've released since Madball. So,
man. Awesome, man. Well, definitely look forward to hearing that. Where can we check that out? Well, you don't have a specific date just yet, or?
Nothing just yet, but after today, I'm going to post some stuff about it. We're in the process of uploading it to streaming things, hoping to get it onto Spotify and Apple Music. And we've got a video in the works. We shot a video that was originally supposed to be kind of like the behind the scenes of everyone just playing in there. Because the interesting thing about the project I didn't get into, We did it completely remotely.
Okay.
Nobody jammed in a room. It was Guilherme had the idea for the project. He said, "Do you have any ideas?" I said, "I got a piece of music that I've been throwing around for a while." I sent it to him. He's like, "Oh, I love this." He's like, "Let me add on to it." So me and him wrote the song together, and then we made a click track for it. We sent it to Texas, where the drummer and the bass player live. The drummer played in a studio along with a reference track, sent that back to us. We did our guitars in our houses. We all did it at home. Basically, everybody contributed their parts individually, remotely. And then we sent it to a studio in Germany. This guy, Christian Kohler, and his studio is called Kohlkeller Studios. I believe they're outside of Frankfurt. And he did a mix for us, and it came out unbelievable, like way better than we ever thought. So everybody's going to be credited. You'll read the whole story. I'm going to start posting some stuff about it as of tonight. And I'm hoping that we'll do another couple of songs. It's, everyone's got their own bands. I got music in the works for further down the road. But this is something that we may, drop a song every now and again, and it should be some fun.
Yeah. Oh, awesome, man. Well, we can't wait to check that out. It sounds great, man. And definitely when you guys do release, something, whenever, we could always definitely have you back on to talk more about it too.
That would be awesome.
Sure, if you're interested. Okay. Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely. All right, Mitch. Well, once again, man, thanks so much for coming on, and good luck with everything. We'll hopefully talk to you soon, bud.
Thank you, guys. Have a good
All
night.
right, thanks for listening to Aftershocks. For more episodes, go to our website at www.aftershockspodcast.com. Visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for more news and information on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe, listen to, and review all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms. For your music listening pleasure, visit our website or go to www.shockwavesradio.com. For all comments and questions, please email us at info@aftershockspodcast.com.